Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. Today we are wrapping up the Love in the Night Readathon, which for me, I started a little bit earlier just so I could film this wrap up, but I will apologise in advance because this wrap up has not been well thought out because this week has been hectic. It's been the first week back of term 4, which is always a little bit hectic at work, and also I spent the weekend looking after my niece, and so I'm very tired. But I'm really excited to talk about what I read. I read some really fantastic things, and then I also read some things that were not as great because I think paranormal romance has the tendency to fall at the extreme, and you know what? That's totally fine. Also, I can't remember any of the prompts that match the books. I will pop something up at the end of the video that shows which books fit which prompts. I just wasn't keeping track. I was just reading in the end, which works best for me. So we're going to jump straight in and start talking about the books. There was one DNF. My very first book of the Readathon was a DNF, which was not an auspicious start. However, that's totally fine. That book was blessed by the Cupid distribution system by Robin Jo Margaret. For some reason, this just didn't hit the mark for me. I just was not interested in continuing it. I think I got like 20% in and just couldn't continue. But anyway, I will probably talk more about that in a DNF wrap up later in the year. So the first book that I read from start to finish was Sweet Summer Serpentine by Rose Santoriello, which is book 2 in the Augury University series. This one is about Adib and Iris. Iris accidentally stumbled across a cure for something while she was, mixing herbs and things together. Like, she didn't intentionally do it. Even though everyone is praising her efforts and, giving her accolades and things for finding this cure, she doesn't believe that she's responsible for that because she doesn't know how she didn't and she can't replicate it. And yet she is sent to Augury University to work alongside Adib to try and recreate some of what she did with this cure. And so, of course, she's having a whole lot of anxiety and issues with dealing with that, coupled with the fact that Adib, who is a snake man, is not very impressed with her at all. This one was fine. It's one of those paranormal romance books that literally sits in the it's fine category because their relationship was, I don't know how to describe it didn't feel like it flowed well. It was like they were constantly arguing, but suddenly they were sleeping together, and then they're arguing again, but then they're in love with one another, and then they're arguing again, and then this. I'm like, I know arguments are part of a relationship, but this just felt a little extreme for me. So it wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't the dynamic of a relationship that I like to read about, whether it's paranormal, contemporary, or anything in between. Then there was No Sugarcoating It by DJ Russo, which is the first book in the Femme Fatale Monsters series. And again, this one was just okay as well. I did start out with very just mid kind of range things. And this one is about Byron, who is a unrepentant playboy and someone who's not very nice, who ends up being targeted by Faith, who is a succubus who needs to meet her quota for hell and ends up luring him in by opening a candy shop. There's a whole lot that goes on here. There's a lot of mentions around maintaining physical body type, etc. So if you're someone who is dealing with an eating disorder or body dysmorphia, just be mindful of that because it does come up quite a bit, but still not my favorite thing I read this week. Then I finally read Primal Mirror by Nalini Singh, and anyone who's about to tell me, Steph, I thought you would have read it earlier. Literally, the middle of this year was not a good year to be reading things that I really wanted to read. I needed to save it, and I'm glad that I did because this just made me so happy to finally pick up and read at a time when I was ready to read it. So this is Auden and Remy's story. We met Remy much earlier in the series. He's the leopard alpha of the Stonefire pack. They're a small pack that he's been building up, and so we've sort of seen him a little bit in the second half of the Side Changeling series, and he discovers that a Psy woman has moved into the property next door, a property that he and his pack have been trying to purchase. As it turns out, the woman who is living there is Auden Scott, who is the daughter of Shoshana and oh my gosh, what's his name? This is why I shouldn't be doing these things after babysitting duty because my brain does not work. Shoshana and Henry Scott, two very unscrupulous members of the Psy Council, as anyone will know. Auden believes that she is broken, and she's also very heavily pregnant for most of this book. We, the reader, know that something is not going quite right. And you figure out pretty quickly if you're reading it. If you know the series, you know what's going on and what's happened to Auden. I'm not going to say it here because it's a massive spoiler, but you figure it out pretty quickly. But Remy is just taken with her and determined to keep her safe and creates this alliance with her. And she recognizes that something isn't quite right and that her personality changes and her mood swings and things like that. There's something else going on. And so she enlists the help of the pack and they just take care of her. And I was just in love with this. I love this pack. I just want more stories with them. So more stories with them would be amazing. I will content warning, there is a traumatic birth sequence in here. Be aware of that. Yeah, it was just really nice. Like I really, really enjoyed it. Again, I haven't reread the book prior to this or this one, so I won't be doing anything with the series until I reread them. But I'm glad that I finally picked up Primal Mirror because it did not disappoint. I also reread One Night, One Bite by Dria Andersen, which was our group book pick for the readathon, and this one is Sebastian and Raven's story. She's out at a vampire club, and there she meets Sebastian, who is sort of the head guard for the King of the Vampires, or the King of the Vampires for his area. And he recognises Raven as his mate, or fated mate, immediately, and it's just a really short, lovely story. It's very steamy. It's great. And then I also read a second Dria Andersen book. This is The Friend Contract, and I can't remember which series this is part of, but it's the first book in a series. And this one is about Gabe and Naomi, and they are shifters, and Naomi is a latent shifter, so she can't actually shift into her animal, and this causes some angst, but she and Gabe have been friends for years and years and years. And he recognizes that she is his mate, but she doesn't realize that. And he tried to tell her at one point after a relationship had gone wrong for her, and she didn't believe him. She thought it was like a pity thing. But this time, at the start of this book, he is determined to prove to her. And the way that he does it is he pretends that he needs a fake date, and they end up fake engaged. There's a forced proximity situation. And yes, while I would have liked the reveal to happen a little bit sooner and a little bit more communication to be happening, it takes quite a few people to actually convince Naomi and to prove to her that Gabe's intentions are actually honourable and that he could be her fated mate, even though she doesn't believe that that's the case. And part of that has to do with the fact that she is a latent shifter. It was fun, and you have a plus size heroine, and an enjoyable time was had all around with this book. I also read A Bite Full of Death, and I forgot to write down the author's name, but that's okay because the book will be on the screen. This one is a dark paranormal romance between Poe and Dex. Poe is a succubus slash reaper, so she's got the genetics of both parents, which causes some issues. And Dex is a guy that she's been stalking, but he's also kind of been stalking her back. This one is not for the faint of heart. It was really, really good. If you are not a fan of blood, gore, zombies who eat flesh, maybe skip this one, but it was a really good time. Also, it does have pegging in it. And then I read probably my favorite new to me author slash book in this list. I know Primal Mirror is a new book, but Nalini Singh is just like an auto read author anyway. And that was a book that was recommended to me by Heather, who, bless her, stayed up really late reading some of these books, and then also sent me a message right before I was about to choose a book to read for the night, and I just went, right, fine, I'm going to read that, because she said she loved it and it was like reading Alone Andrews, and so of course I just went, gimme. And that is Rules of Redemption by T.A. White. It's the first book in the Firebird Chronicles, which is it's basically Alone Andrews set in space, but there are some sort of paranormal elements in terms of the abilities of, the characters. So they're aliens, but they have these abilities. Our protagonist is Kira. She's kind of on the run. She's a salvager. She used to be in the military, but she got out and after something happened, and she finds herself caught up in some politics where she has to go back to a space station where she used to work, and gets caught up in a political plot in that she finds out that she might be descended from a particular group of aliens and they are going to claim her back. And you have Graydon, who is sort of one of the soldiers of this race, who is determined to drag her kicking and screaming back to her people. And then all sorts of things happen because they arrive back on her home planet and they find out that things are afoot and that there is another alien race that might be coming to attack. Like, I'm doing a really terrible job of explaining this, except to say that I loved it. I couldn't put it down. It was over 400 pages. I read it so quickly, and I desperately wanted to read the rest of the series during this week, except it was not the right time to do that. That annoys me so much. I'm going to try and read book 2 this weekend, but then I still can't read the next couple of books because this week is nuts as well. So it's one of those book series that once you start it, you're going to want to read it. And thank you very much to Heather for recommending it to me, because hands down, the best new to me author and book that I read this week. I also read Heart of Iron by Beck McMaster. This is the second book in the Steampunk London series, I think. I thought this series was following the same couple because I did not read anything, and it's not. It's following a separate couple, but you get to see the first couple from the first book in it quite a bit. It is about Will and Lena. Will is a werewolf, and werewolves are very much looked down upon. The vampire ruling class, the blue bloods, are in charge. Humans are sort of a step below that, and everyone is terrified of the lycanthropes. And so Will is sort of confined to staying within the vicinity of his vampire master in Whitechapel, and he is in love with his best friend's wife's sister, and her name is Lena. Lena herself is a really interesting character because she's fiercely independent. She is a tinkerer. She's able to create these amazing little steampunk creations. And she used to love flirting with Will because she thought it was safe, without realizing that Will was, head over heels for her. And so when their paths cross again, it is a little bit electric. And we find out that the Blue Bloods, so the ruling class, are trying to do a deal with some werewolf packs from overseas, but they would like to have a werewolf as part of the deal, despite the fact that in London they've treated werewolves really poorly. And so they're trying to bribe Will into working with them, and Will has his own conditions. It's very much a spy plot. There's a lot of action. It's really fun. McMaster's writing is really easy, and it's a historical kind of setting. So that was a really fun time to go back, because I have not continued the series in ages. So I will have to continue, preferably in a shorter time span than I have between book 1 and book 2. And then the last thing that I read for the readathon was Spell of Desire Volume 1. I meant to try and read more than this, but I just didn't get to it. So I'll try and finish off my reread of the 5 volumes throughout the month. This one is about Coco, who works as an herbalist and has her own little shop and was previously living with her grandmother, who was a white witch. And then Kaname turns up and lets her know that her mother, who she hasn't seen in a very long time, is a black witch and is in fact quite powerful, and her mother's powers have transferred to Coco, and so suddenly things start going haywire around her. It is paranormal romance. It's really fun. I always love revisiting Dragon and Unicorn, who are a dog and a cat but who transform into a unicorn and a dragon, like big beastie kind of character, and they're absolutely adorable. The artwork in this is really pretty. Like it's so nice. And this was one of the first manga series that I read the entire, series of, and I would just like to reread it. And that is my wrap up for this week. As I said, I will pop up a visual on the screen to show you which of the prompts that I hit and which books fit them. I am not shy about doubling, tripling up, etc. for this, because again, this readathon was super chill, but I also wasn't trying to hit every prompt on every challenge because it's only 7 days and I've only got so much time in the week, especially when I'm going back to work and I'm exhausted. In the comments, I'd love to know if you participated or if you're planning on picking up paranormal romance later in the month, because, that's okay. Even though we only ran the readathon for a week, doesn't mean you can't continue and use the prompts to help you pick your books. You do you. If you just want to let me know that you're here but you don't leave a comment, feel free to leave a mirror emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.